for the beauty of the earth, this spinning blue-green ball, yes. Gaia, mother of everything, we walk gently across your back to come together again to this place, to remember how we can live, to remember who we are, to create how we will be. Gaia, our home, the lap in which we live, welcome us. With these words by the Unitarian Universalist minister Barbara Peskin, let us begin.
Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. I am Gina O'Connor, your worship associate for today's service. We wish to recognize and honor the native tribes who lived in this area on unceded land: the Catawbas, the Shawnee, the Delaware, the Cherokees, the Susquehannocks, and the Iroquois, who are also known as the Six Nations tribe. We come together each Sunday morning as a community of seekers, seekers of what is most important in our lives, seekers of understanding in the face of uncertainty and loss, seekers of forgiveness for our shortcomings, seekers of gratitude for the unexpected gifts we receive from all around us. We gather in awe of the beauty of nature and the mysteries of the universe. But most importantly, we come together as seekers of a community of love and empowerment, celebrating our search for truth and meaning in our daily lives. And now, as Alice Irvin comes forward, let us say together here and from our homes the words for lighting the chalice. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, to share. And I invite you to join with us as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help our neighbor, to these ends we covenant, one with another.
And if you would, please turn in our hymnals to our opening song for today. It's 301, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky. Elaine will play it through all the way. I want to invite you now to finish arriving to this time, this place, this gathered community here in person and also online. Take some deep breaths and expand into this space all of who you are, all that you carry through the week, all that you aspire to be. It's been since the end of April that I had a chance to spend this time of meditation, reflection, and silence with this congregation. I've missed you, and I've missed this time. And so many things have happened in our world and in our personal lives. I've thought of you often. I've held you in my heart with loving thoughts and was hoping that you were doing the same for me. I felt connected during the time that I was away, and it just feels so wonderful to be back with you again in person. This week, before I share some of our favorite meditation words by Wendell Berry, I wanted to just briefly lift up what's been on my mind and in my heart this week, and I know that there are many of you who have been thinking about this as well. We've passed the 6-month mark of the war in Ukraine, and it's troubling not to see an end to that any time soon. Our hearts reach out to those in harm's way and to all of those who are trying to work toward a resolution. We're also aware that in these past couple of weeks and maybe still to come, our children and young people are going back to school. And that's after, 2 years of the pandemic where everything was topsy-turvy. We had to do things in a lot of different ways that were difficult for our kids and for our families, for our teachers, of course. And so we're starting a new year, hopefully maybe with a little bit more of the limitations lifted, but we're keenly aware of how the impact of public violence that has affected children and the lives of families and whole communities is hard to shake as our kids are going back to school. So we want to hold all of our families in our hearts, give them extra support, especially during the startup time, and hope for a good school year for all of our children and youth, no matter what their age. And these days, pretty much every week, we get to see a new climate crisis erupting somewhere. And a lot of those are pretty close to home. So I just invite you to take a moment to hold a space, acknowledging the uncertainty, acknowledging the upheaval of the severe climate changes that we're experiencing in this time period, and to extend our loving thoughts to all those whose lives are really being disrupted by it, and the number of refugees of all kinds that we have in our midst. That reading by Wendell Berry, one of our favorites. It will be followed with a period of silence for your own time of meditation and reflection. When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Please join me in the silence. May our place in nature comfort and inspire us to live lives that create the world we want to see. May it be so.
Our words for reflection today are by the poet T.S. Eliot from the Four Quartets. The first reading is found in our hymnal, and the second, more cryptic stance was selected by Reverend Julie to serve as a kind of Zen koan, a paradoxical verse to relate to her message today. What we call a beginning is often an end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. In order to arrive at what you do not know, you must go by a way which is the way of ignorance. In order to possess what you do not possess, you must go by the way of dispossession. In order to arrive at what you are not, you must go through the way which you are not. And what you do not know is the only thing you know. And what you own is what you do not own. And where you are is where you are not.
I'm still pondering that myself. Hi. Long time no see. I missed you. But all kidding aside, it's so great to be back at church with you. I had a wonderful sabbatical time, and part of why I chose the reading is that, it gave me an opportunity not only to reflect on my professional life as a minister, but to be a person outside of the ministry, to reclaim the rest of my life that is always there, but sometimes gets overshadowed. And we all fall into that. You know, a lot of times we define ourselves or identify ourselves by our roles and our responsibilities, whatever they may be, wherever we are in our lives. But we're always much more than that. And it's good to remember that. We all need a Sabbath where we can step back from those kinds of defining roles and embrace who we are as a bigger person, as a bigger soul or spirit. So, as far as my sabbatical, it really could not have been any better. And so, you know, I come back with just a sense of very deep gratitude. Deep gratitude, of course, for the opportunity to have a sabbatical time, to be in a profession where it's part of the expectations that ministers as academic people step away from the hustle and bustle to recharge their batteries, to do the kinds of professional development that is hard to do in the day-to-day. So I'm deeply grateful for that opportunity. I am deeply grateful for all the different kinds of things I got to do, both professional and personal, so many things that I thoroughly enjoyed. And I'm coming back feeling centered, energized, and inspired even. I've mentioned to a couple of people so far that it feels like my pantry of inner resources has been restocked with all kinds of good stuff. The staples, of course, but some interesting new metaphorical foods to look forward to. That inner pantry of mine has two sides. One is the professional section, not perfectional, professional section of tools and sources of inspiration for my professional life. But the other side of the room, which is also very important, that I learned a lot about needing during the pandemic time, is that personal stock of inspiration and nourishment. Not only will my sabbatical continue to nourish me in the coming weeks and months, I have plenty of stuff that I just can't wait to start sharing with you. Today's just going to be the tip of the iceberg. I'm just going to have time to give you a little taste, a little preview of some of the areas that I'll be going to in the time to come. But before I do that, I want to tell you that I'm also feeling such deep gratitude for this congregation and its many leaders and active members and friends. It's wonderful to return from sabbatical and find that all of our planning and preparation for sabbatical and how my usual responsibilities would be covered in my absence seems to have paid off. What I've heard so far and could observe from a distance these past few months is not only did things go smoothly, but you enjoyed some fabulous Sunday services and you've been busy tending to our community and to our beautiful church campus. Have you all poked your head in to see how wonderful our library looks these days? You may not be able to see it, but in this beautiful sanctuary room, all its seams have been recently caulked to guard against those water leaks that we are familiar with. And before long, our whole exterior will receive a needed fresh coat of paint. And that's not even yet mentioning the huge community effort it takes to have a successful yard crawl. We know how much that work that takes and how much organization and leadership. Thank you, Gina and John O'Connor, and all of you, donors, shoppers, and volunteers of all kinds. It takes an army of worker bees, and thankfully, we have that here. You guys are just awesome. And what I hear from a little birdie is that many of you really enjoyed volunteering to help out because it gave you an opportunity, especially after this long pandemic time, to visit with your church pals that you don't get to see enough of. And aren't we fortunate to have such a great minister emeritus among us? These past 4 years, since I arrived on the scene, I've really enjoyed getting to know both Henry and Nancy, to work with them on the worship committee and with Henry as a part of our pastoral care team. I'm delighted that Rev. Henry got a chance to be back in the pulpit regularly, especially after his premature retirement due to health concerns a few years ago. On behalf of all of us, thank you, Henry. So coming back to church from my sabbatical, as you can see, I'm feeling very grateful. We made it through a couple of really tough COVID years, and it has not been easy by any stretch of the imagination. But thankfully, we made it through, largely intact. There are many congregations and ministers who did not fare as well as we, unfortunately. During my sabbatical, I had a chance to have some substantive conversations with my UU colleagues about how we weathered these past 2 years, and I heard too many sad stories about both ministers and congregations in crisis. All of that to say, let's not take our good thing for granted. Let's take time to appreciate it, to appreciate our own efforts, and to appreciate one another. You guys did great these past couple of years. Yesterday, we had a board retreat to prepare for the coming year. In my usual monthly ministers report, I gave them a 2-page summary of my sabbatical activities, reporting back, as it were. One of my closest friends, who is a retired college professor and who I talk with on a regular basis, throughout the summer, when I was filling her in, she would say, "I'm really impressed with how well you choreographed this time to be able to do so many things." Yes, me too. As you may recall, my sabbatical started on May 1st. Not to waste any time in getting started, on May 1st, I traveled to Los Cabos, Mexico. I returned to a place I'd visited once before, but this time for 3 weeks, the longest trip I've made anywhere. It gave me a chance to decompress. I had a balcony view of the southernmost tip of the Baja California Peninsula. I spent a lot of time just looking at the sky and the water. But I also ate well, did some exploring in local small towns. I love Mexican regional handcrafts. I had good time to read, to write, and I got to do a series of little oil paintings from my balcony studio. Heavenly. One thing, though, that I left out of my report to the board yesterday was that during my sabbatical, I had a personal goal to start learning to play and sing some bossa nova songs. During the lockdown, one of my coping mechanisms was to do a deep dive into the music of Antonio Carlos Jobim of Brazil. You may recall him being called Tom Jobim, the composer of Girl from Ipanema. Anyway, before the sabbatical, I asked our resident classical guitarist, Bruce Shaw, who's also an usher with us this morning, if he might have an extra classical guitar hanging around that he wasn't using, so I could just see if I might be able to learn some bossa nova tunes. It's a totally different style than what I've ever done before. He graciously provided me with a lovely guitar, which was made in Mexico. And I don't think I've told him this yet. I took it to Mexico with me, so I could see what I might be able to do. This was really challenging for me, but I loved it. I'm happy now to report that by the end of my sabbatical time, I can now sing and play 4 Joe Beam bossa nova tunes from memory. Go me! While I was in Mexico, I also completed, with a team from church, a Right Relations training course that was offered by the Unitarian Universalist Association last spring. We plan to do some follow-up sharing with the congregation soon on what we learned and ideas of what we can implement here. But in addition to that, that was online, but in addition to that, I started 3 other live online learning series that I participated throughout the rest of the summer. I completed 2 of those series, and the 3rd will be ongoing. The longest series was led and offered by the contemporary ex-Catholic priest and theologian, Matthew Fox, called 7 Mystics on Creation and Spirituality. It covered the lives and works of Thomas Berry, Mary Oliver, Hildegard of Bingen, Thomas Aquinas, Meister Eckhart, Thomas Merton, and Julian of Norwich. It was lovely. The other 3-part series was offered live and online by the poet David Whyte, W-H-Y-T-E, and he called this series The Door Beneath Everything, from a line in one of his poems. This poet offered reflections on how the troubles that we struggle to avoid in our lives, and we all do that, actually have the potential to be customized lessons for us that can actually deeply enrich our lives. The notion that the troubles that we have are perfectly suited to teach us what we need to know most. Both of these were not only educational in that they provided both material and teaching approaches that I can share with this congregation, but they were also nourishing to me in a personal and spiritual way. It's so important that I'm able to have my own well of inspiration refilled by these kinds of things. The 3rd fun and educational series I started, and that will be ongoing, is the World Art History Certificate Program through the Smithsonian Institute. What a fantastic resource. You work at your own pace toward fulfilling 10 credits, 4 in a core curriculum and 6 of electives. I'm almost already halfway through. Most of the offerings are online lectures offered by experts in their fields, with excellent graphics, of course, but there are also some home studio workshops as well. So far, I've had sessions on the Japanese woman artist Kusama, on comparing the works of painter Edward Hopper and filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock, on African art through the centuries, and a workshop on photography and surrealism. When I got back from Mexico in May, I also took my first in-person course down the road in Harrisonburg at the Center for Justice and Peace Building, which is a part of the Eastern Mennonite University. I'd actually taken 3 online courses during the pandemic with them, so I was really looking forward to be in person with the group of people that they bring together for their summer institutes. The course that I took was a second part in a core program that they've been offering actually since 9/11, called STAR. The acronym is STAR, Strategies for Trauma Awareness and Resilience. And this second course, once I completed it, credits me to be what they call a STAR practitioner, to apply the learnings through the material and exercises to my particular area of work. And the people who engage in the class come from a lot of different kinds of work fields. So as a class project, as part of the course, I put together a potential weekend retreat workshop for you guys, for congregation members and community members, that I look forward to offering sometime soon, probably closer to the winter time. And right now the working title is called Growth and Healing Through Creative Engagement in the Arts. It's the way that the arts, all the different kinds of arts, each of us kind of lean toward one thing or another, but that they really help us to cope and sometimes heal from difficult situations, either in our personal lives or the things that we're observing in the larger world. So I'm really looking forward to sharing, some new ideas and some new exercises. And I think that it will really build well on not only the wonderful artist community that we already have in this congregation, but also our covenant group culture here of coming together to support each other's growth in like a small group ministry. So I'm really looking forward to that. In addition to the learning opportunities, of course, I had a time to make some other trips. A quick trip to New York City and a week each in Chicago and New Orleans and Pensacola, where I got to visit family and friends. New York City, I saw a friend that I hadn't seen in almost 30 years, so it was a real treat. And of course, everywhere I went, I always try to fit in art museums and concerts. So I kind of pulled out all the stops, gave myself permission, to go above and beyond and make up for lost time between the pandemic and not giving myself permission to do these kinds of things on a regular basis because I'm always thinking about work. I know I'm not alone in that regard. During my trip in Chicago, I made kind of a personal pilgrimage to visit each of my parents' grave sites for the first time since their funerals. It was 25 years since I had been to where my father and my grandmother are buried in northern Indiana, and 6 years since we interred my mother's ashes at her family church where she grew up. So, needless to say, that was both an important and powerful experience for me to be able to do. All in all, I'm definitely feeling renewed and refreshed for my ministry here with all of you. And I'm really looking forward to meeting the new folks among us. While things overall feel much more settled now in our day-to-day lives, especially after all of that topsy-turvy time for a couple of years, we're still at a place looking forward where we live with much uncertainty. For those tender-hearted folks among us who follow the daily news, we have worries over public health, the economy, politics, the weather, all these climate crises, and those threats of public violence. But added to all of that we're watching and that is impacting us, of course, we have all of the challenge of day-to-day life, wherever we might be in this part of our lives. It's a lot to carry. And even though things have gotten easier in a lot of respects, we're all still feeling very tired, right? As we begin a new year, a new school year, a new church program year, given the continued limitations that are just still part of the mix, let's remember to pause and appreciate where we are in contrast to 2 years ago in those first months of the pandemic in 2020. Let's remember to pause and be grateful for all the ways that we found to cope, to adapt, to keep going, despite the anxieties, the trepidations, and the real losses that we witnessed and experienced. Let's remember not to take for granted all the wonderful sources of support and encouragement that help to sustain us through those times, wherever we were able to find them. And in looking forward, rather than hoping and expecting things to match a previous norm that was familiar to us, let's try to make the best with what we have to work with right here, right now, at any given moment. It means not getting too attached to having things be those old familiar ways. It means being willing to try new things, experiment, approach things in a different way to make the most of what we have to work with. We're still very much in a time of transition in this world. I don't anticipate things settling down anytime soon. So I suggest that we try to embrace the positive possibilities that might emerge if we keep our hearts and minds open. If we focus on being the part of the positive change that's needed that we can do. Taking good care of ourselves and each other, giving ourselves permission to be flexible and creative, maybe even a little adventurous in meeting the challenges before us. What we do here at church matters. Our being together in person and online, all the different ways that we meet each other and contribute to our larger communities makes a difference in our world. Let's celebrate it. Let's sustain it as best we can for the long haul, which is needed. And let's embrace the journey. Blessed be, and amen.
The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We will now gratefully receive an offering to sustain this self-supporting church and its ministries within and beyond our walls. If you happen to be watching us online, we hope you will consider making an offering after today's service through our webpage, uushenandoah.org.
If you would please turn again in our hymnal to a closing song for today, number 331, Life is the Greatest Gift of All, and rise in body or spirit as we sing together. Elaine will play it through once all the way before we begin. You may be seated. Before I offer some brief closing words from the Gaelic tradition, I just want to lift up the excitement that I feel that many of you probably share with me since I was here in the spring, of the new images from space, deep space from the James Webb Telescope, and how that is, when we think of our human minds, how those images are helping us to expand our notions of the universe and of ourselves within it. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the infinite peace to you. And I see, of course, because I'm out of practice, that I skipped something important. So we're going to circle back. Even though the fans blew out our chalice flame, our servant candle is still lit over here. So we'll do that to end our service before the postlude.
As Alice Irvin comes forward to extinguish the flame, let us say together here and from our homes the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.